Hello and welcome back to another video. For this we will be talking about the Lockheed Martin F-80 or also P-80 Shooting Star. For this I was sent a replay by the player Gandalf, as you can see in the bottom, which will be playing in the background as I talk about the aircraft. The sources I have used you can check in the comments. So let's get into it, right? So first of all, the history of the aircraft starts on June 18th in 1943 as the Lockheed engineer Clarence Johnson, also nicknamed Kelly, was able to enlist a team of engineers and shop mechanics to meet regularly in a circus tent where they built this aircraft in high secrecy. That's also why they used the circus tent. This was to keep onlookers away. Some sort of visual cover was fairly common with secret projects. Another one that could be listed would be the battleship Yamato, that was also built in similar circumstances, just not on a circus tent, right? They covered it differently. Um, Clarence himself already tried to set a jet design in the year 39. However, that didn't exactly work out for him as the demand and interest for jet fighters at that time was fairly low. But with the appearance of the German Me-262, he finally got his chance to design this aircraft. And for that he got an impressive deadline of only 150 days, for which they had to work 10 hours a day for 6 days a week. Interesting is also that for the first prototypes they used, or initially for the development, they used the British H-1B turbojet engine, as the Americans didn't have a suitable engine at that point. The engine itself put out 2,460 lbs of thrust, or in metric units 1,116 kilograms. And even more respective than the deadline itself is actually the fact that they managed to complete the first completely functional prototype after 143 days. This is not to mean that the first flying model was done, but in fact the entirely armed fighter jet, which would be the XP-80. Later the P-80A, the first production model, received a General Electric I-40 turbojet with 4,000 lips of thrust, or 1,814 kilograms of thrust. But this is only for the very first variants, so keep that in mind. Later, aircraft got a production variant of this engine, which would be the General Electric J33 GE11, which is a fairly long name, so usually it's just called J33. It has a bit lower thrust with 3,850 pounds or 1,746 kilograms. But it is, as I said, essentially just a production variant of the I-40. Noting stats about the P-80 would also be that it had an empty weight of 7,920 pounds and in kilograms a weight of 3,593. Loaded, it had a weight of 11,700 pounds, while having a loaded weight of 5,307 kilograms if using metric units. Its absolute maximum the early P-80 variant could carry, so the P-80A, was only 14,000 pounds, which was later increased, or 6,350 kilograms. As you can see, it has fairly large wings, which, to be specific, are 38 feet and 10 inches or 11.83 meters long. Although I have found the statistics saying that they were 11.81 meters, but that is negatable, I would believe. The total wing area of the wings is as much as 237.7 square feet and 22 square meters. The length of the entire aircraft that you can see here, as he is battling the LA-2, was 34 feet and 6 inches or 10.51 meters. The height of the aircraft was fairly low actually, with 11 feet and 4 inches or 3.45 meters. And its max speed, which should also be reflected by its stats in War Thunder, is 558 miles per hour or 898 kilometers. With that, it actually was capable of outspeeding the Me-262 under regular conditions, which was the aircraft that led to this design being pushed or created to begin with. Aside of the climb rate we already have in game, to reach a height of 20,000 feet or roughly 6 kilometers, it only required 5.5 minutes. Its service ceiling was also very high with 45,000 feet or 13.716 kilometers. It had a regular range of 780 miles or 1,255 kilometers, which is of course not really relevant for the game as the aircraft is shown in the game itself, because I believe even if you're flying in simulator you wouldn't reach this range. Also, you have probably seen pictures of the F-80 or P-80 with small ballast tanks on the wingtips, which it could also carry, and it could have an absolute max range of 1,440 miles or 2,317 kilometers. As mentioned, it had internal and external fuel tanks. The internal fuel capacity was 200 to 285 gallons, or around 760 to 1080 liters. And the small tanks that you oftentimes see on the wingtips on pictures or in museums as well are 225 gallons or 851 liters. Here it should be noted that these varied with the variants and that most early variants didn't have these tanks. Also to note is that it had two wing tanks, which were not self-sealing, but the fuselage tank was self-sealing. As you could have already seen here multiple times in the match, it is armed with 6 Browning MGs with a capacity of 200 rounds per gun. These sit also, as you have seen, in the nose. On top of that, it could potentially carry an external armament of either 2,000 pounds or 907 kilograms, or in return for the bomb it could also carry 10 0.5-inch rockets instead. There was also in 1947 a special modified version of the P-80 or F-80A, which was actually capable of reaching a speed of 624 miles per hour or 1,004 kilometers. This happening in 47, this aircraft relatively easily claimed the speed world record at the time, which it was specifically modified for. Of course, combat variants as already specified weren't able to reach this, but this is impressive nonetheless. Also, to keep in mind, this is the first large-scale production jet fighter, while the first in actual combat use would be the Me-262. That fighter wasn't produced in any large numbers. And also notably, while it was designed against the Me-262, it actually didn't see any combat action during the war. So if you get to fight a Me-262 or something like this in-game, this wouldn't be an historical encounter. They were sent to Italy and to Great Britain respectively, 2 each actually, where they saw no action. One interesting thing that is argued about a bit, as I found, is that the Arado 234, which we also have in-game in the German bomber tree, also saw action in Italy in the same time frame, but that is most likely coincidence. It is spectated if there was any sort of reason to deploy it there, or if they actually wanted to use it in combat roles, but there isn't really anything hinting that this is actually the case. So effectively this aircraft was just a sort of morale boost for the troops there, but it didn't engage any aircraft. But maybe under different conditions it could have actually fought with the Arados. The 2 that went to Great Britain unfortunately crashed during several test flights, while they also killed their pilots, which wasn't too uncommon with early jets. but it's quite an unfortunate fate. So as already specified, this plane did not see action like you can see here during the World War. However, shortly after, as many probably know, there was the Korean conflict, or the Korean War specifically, where it actually fought in the first jet versus jet encounter, and it in fact won this encounter. They had successfully shot down a MiG-15 piloted by Lieutenant Russell Brown. Or, not the MiG-15, right? This historic event took place on the 10th of November 1950, and the P-80s or F-80s generally attributed quite a lot during the war, so it is supposed to have shot down 75% of the enemy aircraft that of which were shot down. However, this plane wasn't just some sort of miracle or perfect aircraft that outperformed everything else. It also had several drawbacks actually. Aside of being developed and deployed just a bit too late and having initial production problems. So initially the idea was to, as soon as it is ready, to produce it in as high numbers as possible, but the orders were actually reduced, which is also why only 2 ended up in Italy, and they eventually wouldn't fight anything during the war. The problem is that it was partially due to its very high speed, very hard to fly. So there were too many crashes in this aircraft. As you've also already noted with the test flights, 2 of those in Britain crashed. Because of that, they decided to make a 2-seated trainer aircraft variant of this called the T-33, which was also produced for a longer time. But ironically, the T-33, which was designed to reduce the losses of this aircraft, actually had quite high casualties initially as well. Specifically, it had a fault, or a design fault, with the fuel cap behind the cockpit, where if not tightened correctly, which apparently happened quite a lot, the fuel would be sucked out by the created vacuum, and upon reaching a certain speed, the fuel would ignite. So pretty much at takeoff, these trainer aircraft would explode. However, this was fixed in a relatively short succession, and the design flaw was fixed, which resulted in no further explosions of the aircraft. And after its initial service in the Korean War, it was relatively quickly replaced with the F-86 Sabre, which you will also find in game. Which would also pretty much sum up all important information about this aircraft. Generally, it is often overlooked because it wasn't the first fighter in the war and essentially had no use in it, and the Korean War isn't talked about that much, but it can actually be attributed quite a lot. So it was an important stepping stone in the American aircraft development, and it actually saw quite a lot of successful action during the Korean War, where it, as already said, won the first jet versus jet encounter, which is quite a significant event. But this aircraft is usually heavily overshadowed by the likes of the MiG-15 or even earlier jets, the Mi-262. And under different circumstances, this might have actually seen combat against German aircraft. There were also ideas that it might have possibly been ideas to send it to over Germany to engage German fighters, but it's doubtful that it actually had the range for that. So those are most likely just rumors, because it wasn't capable of actually engaging the inland Mi-262 airfields inside of Germany while starting from Britain. So that's generally found fairly unlikely. So for the last bit, we have one last engagement with an LA-200 here in the background, which I believe he actually wins. As you can see, he successfully dodged here. And you can also see the aircraft again as he flies in an attack here. Oh. Here you can see where they are located in the nose. Here. The guns I talked about earlier. And aside of that, that's pretty much it. If you liked this video, or if you didn't like something, then please tell me that. It's the first time I attempted to do something like this. As I said, the sources are going to be in the comments. If you would like to see more videos of this kind, then well, please leave that in the comments as well. I have put quite a lot more work into it than my usual videos. Although I know that they're not on the level, or that this is not on the level of other professionally created videos, but I still hope that you liked it. And here you shot down the LA200, and I think this is a good point to end the video. So again, I would like some feedback in the comments, and if you would like to see more of this again, or if this is pointless. Otherwise, I personally enjoyed making this, and goodbye until the next time. Thank you for listening.